The metal ladder scraped against the gutter and made a sound that cut through the quiet cul-de-sac like a warning bell. Marcus steadied it with one hand and felt the cold through his gloves. The storm last night had tossed branches across roofs and yards, and the sky still wore the dull color of wet cement. He could smell damp leaves and the faint sweetness of someone's dryer sheet drifting from a vent. He was halfway up when an SUV slowed near the curb and idled. He knew the look. Windows tinted, driver measuring him from a shadow. Marcus set the base of the ladder more firmly into the grass and lifted his inspection bag over his shoulder. He preferred to start with the roof photograph missing shingles. Check flashing, trace the path water had taken. He was alone at a house with a bank lock on the front door. Vacant, for sale. He had the work order and the combination code. He had done everything by the book since he was 20, since the day he could first afford his own tools. The notebook in his jacket pocket had been with him since his carpentry apprentice days. Notes kept him honest. Checklists kept him safe. The SUV eased forward and parked across the street. A woman stepped out wearing a fleece and sneakers with bright laces, phone already in her hand. She stared, then pretended to pick at a wayward leaf on her hedge. Marcus forced his focus back to the job. He climbed boots, careful on each rung. Up on the roof, he crouched low, scanned the slope. Shingles curled near the ridge. A shallow dip above the kitchen. A vent cap loose. He took pictures, slow and neat, letting his breath settle. By the time he was back on the ground, the SUV had left. Another car had taken its place. A sedan this time, older, paint chalking. An older man leaned against it with a stiff posture, arms folded. He had the look of a person who knew everyone on his block and wanted to keep it that way. As Marcus moved toward the front door, the man cleared his throat like a signal. "Excuse me," the man said. The tone was polite, but edged. "Can I help you with something?" Marcus kept his voice even. "Home inspection. Work order from the bank. House is vacant." The man's eyes flicked to Marcus's bag, to the lockbox. "You got a card?" Marcus reached for his wallet slowly and offered one. The man stared at the printed name, at the line that said Licensed Inspector, New Jersey. He didn't introduce himself. He didn't hand the card back. He took a picture of it with his phone. "Some things were stolen a while back," he said. "Just keeping an eye out." "Understand?" Marcus said. He punched in the code, lifted the key, and opened the door. The house breathed out cold, stale air. He smelled old carpet and faint mildew. The living room had that abandoned echo of a place that used to hold laughter. An empty nail line where family photos once hung. A circle on the wall where a clock had made a sunless mark. He clicked on his flashlight and did what he always did. Outlet test, window seals, water stains, floor bounce. He kept his body language calm and his hands visible when he moved by the front window because he knew he was being watched. He worked anyway, moving room to room, careful and quick. He was in the kitchen when he heard the siren, distant at first, then swelling, tires on wet asphalt. Marcus straightened and looked through the front window. The older man stepped back from the curb as a patrol car rolled to a stop halfway up the driveway. Lights spun over the bare shrubs. The younger officer in the driver's seat clicked off the siren. The older one in the passenger seat scanned the porch. Marcus blinked and felt a small, familiar heaviness settle in his chest. Not fear, not surprise, just a weight. He set the flashlight down where it could be seen. He walked toward the open door and stood inside the frame with his hands out and the key visible. "Morning," he said. "Inspector. Work order is on the kitchen counter. Want me to step out?" "Stay where you are," the older officer said. He had that command voice that could be soothing or sharp, depending on the day. "We got a call about a possible break-in." Marcus nodded toward the paper with the bank's letterhead. "Lockbox code is there. My card's outside with the neighbor." The officers shared a look. The younger one moved to the porch, eyes scanning the interior. He glanced at the paper, at the neat array of tools on the counter. He relaxed a notch. The older officer took Marcus's card from the neighbor, who hovered with concern that felt like a tight shirt. "Can I see some ID?" The older officer asked. "Sure," Marcus said. He moved slow, keeping his hands open and motions clear. He placed his wallet on the counter, slid his license out, and held it up. There was a pause in which nothing dramatic happened. Just a small, steady burn of frustration in Marcus's ribs. Every pause like this carried years, and he had learned not to let those years control his hands or his face. The younger officer nodded. "Looks in order," he said. "Mind if we take a quick walk through?" "Go ahead," Marcus said. "Careful near the kitchen. Floor's got some bounce." The older officer gave a small, measured nod and stepped inside, shoes leaving damp marks on the hardwood. The neighbor stayed on the lawn with his arms still crossed. Marcus felt the urge to say something polite and easy. He didn't. He turned back to his job. He moved into the basement stairwell. The air grew cooler and denser. He clicked the flashlight back on, and the beam cut through dust motes. He noted a hairline crack in the foundation. He listened to the furnace sitting silent, a square of metal with a manufacturer's plate dulled by time. There was a faint, unpleasant scent below the mildew. Metallic, sour. He paused. He checked the joint at the furnace exhaust, where the steel pipe met the wall. His light found a seam of jagged foil tape, poorly done. He held the back of his hand near the pipe's shoulder and felt warmth, even though the thermostat upstairs was off. He frowned, turned his head, and realized the scent wasn't only in the basement. It was climbing up from somewhere else. Marcus pulled a small meter from his bag. It was scuffed and reliable, the kind of tool he trusted more than any app. He clicked it on. The display woke with a blue glow. He moved the sensor near the joint, then near the basement window, then near the back door. The readings jumped. Not high, but wrong. He followed the numbers like a trail up the back stairs, through the kitchen, to the laundry room that shared a wall with the neighbor's garage. The meter chirped. The numbers rose. Carbon monoxide. Not severe in this house, but the airflow was pulling something through the shared wall. The neighbor's house had the older man's sedan in the driveway. The garage door was closed. He looked at the patrol car still idling out front and made a choice without drama. He stepped fast out to the porch, meter in hand. "Officer," he called, voice steady but urgent. "I need help right now. Possible CO leak next door." The older officer's posture changed, skepticism falling away as training clicked on. "Where?" "Through the laundry wall," Marcus said. "Your neighbor's garage is tight and the readings are up. Could be a running engine or a bad heater. I can't access from here." The neighbor's arms fell from their folded pose. His face opened with confusion that turned into fear. "My wife is home," he said. "She's taking a nap." The younger officer was already on his radio, voice clipped. The older officer stepped to the neighbor. "You have a key to the garage?" They moved fast and quiet over wet grass. The neighbor's hand shook as he punched the code on the side door. The officer pushed in, and a wave of exhaust smell rolled out, obvious now that the door was open. A generator hummed in the corner. Last night's storm had knocked power out for hours and started it into service, and nobody had turned it fully off. The garage was attached to the house. Poor ventilation had done the rest. The officer hit the switch, and the engine cough stopped. He threw the main garage door open, and fresh air spilled in. The neighbor sprinted inside, yelling for his wife in a rough voice. Marcus followed to the threshold and stayed there, ready if asked. He kept the meter up, watching numbers that took too long to drop. He heard feet. He heard the older man's call, answered with a startled, "I'm coming, I'm coming." And then he saw Hersmal, hair mussed, eyes squinting against light, staggering to the door. "Ma'am, out to the lawn," the older officer said, and his voice was soft now. Marcus stepped aside and watched them guide her to the porch steps. The younger officer already had paramedics en route. The neighbor kept saying, "I didn't know," like a prayer. They sat the woman on the steps in the cold sunlight. She breathed in air like it was something she hadn't known she needed. The older officer placed a hand on her shoulder to steady her. Marcus held the meter near her and watched the numbers fall toward normal. He felt the weight in his chest shift. It didn't vanish. It rarely did. But it moved. The paramedics arrived quick. Oxygen mask, checks, gentle questions. The cul-de-sac gathered, people slipping out of front doors, attracted by the lights and the quiet urgency of a near miss. Marcus stood apart, notebook in one hand, meter in the other. He watched the neighbor, who looked at his wife as if the world had tilted back into place. The older officer walked to Marcus, while the younger gave the out clear to dispatch. Up close, the officer's face had lines that looked earned. He spoke in a low voice. "Thank you," he said. "Not just words. Not scripted. You caught it." Marcus shrugged. The numbers did. The officer glanced toward the SUV that had taken the first lap around the block. The woman in the fleece had returned and stood with her arms crossed against the cold, eyes wide. The officer looked back to Marcus, and his tone shifted again, humble now. "I should have started with your work order," he said. "We get calls, we respond. Sometimes we carry the tone of the call with us. That's on me." Marcus let out a breath he didn't realize he'd been holding. "It's been a long morning for everyone," he said. The neighbor approached with his wife's hand in his grip. He was not as stiff now. He looked smaller. He held the business card he'd photographed, edges bent from his grip, and he tried to speak twice before words found him. "My wife's name is Ellen," he said, as if that detail could fix something. I called because I saw a stranger at a vacant house. That's the truth of it. But I didn't see you." He swallowed. "I didn't see the safety vest, or the ladder, or the company name. I saw what I wanted to prevent. I missed what you were actually doing." Ellen tugged his sleeve lightly. "He saw something else first," she said through the oxygen mask, voice thin but steady. "He saw a person. That's why I'm sitting here." They stood in a small circle. The officer, the neighbor, his wife, a home inspector who had a notebook full of roof pitches and furnace serial numbers and crawlspace notes. A cul-de-sac that would go back to quiet once the lights shut off and the garage aired out and the coffee went back on. Marcus nodded and accepted the thanks the way he had learned to accept both praise and suspicion, as facts, not definitions. He would do the rest of the inspection. He would write it clean and precise. He would leave the key in the lockbox and drive to the next address, because that was the job. He took one last reading near the shared wall by the laundry. Numbers were back to safe. He snapped a photo of the old furnace label, then closed his notebook on a page that now had an extra line. Found possible CO issue. Neighbor assisted. First responders notified. Resolved, he kept his handwriting even. He kept the day moving forward. Before he left, the neighbor stopped him with a soft "hey." The man's face had changed, not only because fear had stripped it down, but because something like recognition had filled it back up. "If you're ever on this street again," he said, "and you see me out, I hope you'll call me by my name. I'm Walt." "Marcus," he said. "Nice to meet you, Walt." They shook hands. It felt ordinary. That was the point. He folded the ladder and slid it into the truck bed. The sky had brightened, a pale patch breaking through the clouds. As he drove off, he watched the mirror until the cul-de-sac curved out of sight. He thought of his father telling him when he was young to double-check joists, to never rush a measurement, to let the truth of the work earn the respect. He thought of how long that took sometimes. He thought of how a meter chirp could change a morning, and how one person's caution could become another person's rescue in the space of a few minutes. The road straightened. The next address waited. He turned the radio down and let the hum of the engine be its own kind of calm. He didn't expect the world to be fair today. He expected it to be ordinary. He felt that could be enough, if enough people chose to see what was in front of them instead of what they feared. If enough people chose to ask a name first. He stopped at a red light and glanced at the back seat where his old notebook lay on a pile of clean inspection forms. The sunlight hit the edge of the cover and made it look newer than it was. He reached for it at the next stop sign and added one more line under the morning's notes. Met Walt, met Ellen, everyone okay. When he pulled onto the next street, he heard himself breathe, slow and full, and the air tasted like rain finally moving on. If a morning can hold suspicion and gratitude in the same hour, he thought, maybe a neighborhood can too. Maybe that is how change actually looks: quiet, imperfect, and caught in the act of noticing. How many moments like this have you witnessed, where a snap judgment gave way to a human face and changed the day?